All right, joining us now, great pleasure, Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Mr. James Comer. Chairman Comer, welcome back, sir. I want to get to Bobulinski, and I want to get to classified documents, but I want to start with what Mike Johnson said today, if you don't mind. Speaker Johnson made some very bold statements. He basically said, this is Valentine's Day, and we have to give Americans more love. The White House and the Democrats are ignoring it. They're giving money, foreign aid to the Ukraine, and we should have a protection of the U.S. border first. Basically, as I read Speaker Johnson, there's not going to be any vote in the near term on the Senate bill. Can you enlighten us on this, Mr. Comer?
I strongly support what Speaker Johnson just said. Look, the people back home in Kentucky, they want to spend their hard-earned tax dollars on America First policies. They want to secure our southern border. That's one of the top priorities in my district. So this is where Congress needs to focus. The president already has the authority to secure the border. He doesn't need more money. He doesn't need a bill passed by Congress granting an amnesty. He just needs to do his job. We know he's not done his job because he immediately halted the construction of the southern border wall that President Trump started, that we funded, and he filed to the Supreme Court to remove the razor wire that the Texas National Guard put down to obstruct people from crossing. So we know where Joe Biden is, and I support Speaker Johnson's statement.
And according to Speaker Johnson today, just a follow-up, you're my nearest poll to the Republican leadership. So I got to ask you these questions, even though it's not your direct oversight. But you're a smart fellow, and you know all this stuff anyway. Johnson says Biden won't meet with him. He's trying to get a meeting for a month to talk about border security, to talk about national security, and also to talk about the budget and appropriation bills. And I'll bet you, Mr. Comer, part of that conversation, I don't know if you saw Newt Gingrich op-ed piece, where are the pay-fors from the Senate? You know, Republican senators voted for this Ukraine money, not a single pay-for. And that's one of the reasons why we're going bankrupt.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, we can't continue this excessive spending, wasteful spending. We have to look at what is our priority. What's the priority of the American people? And it's not giving Ukraine a blank check. It's paying our own bills. It's securing our own border. It's fixing our own broken, crumbling infrastructure. That's what the American people want us to invest in, and they want us to invest what we take in. We cannot continue to spend $2 trillion more than we take in. You've talked about this for many, many years, and that's the position of a majority of Republicans in the House of Representatives.
One last one. So for the moment, to use Speaker Johnson, the GOP won't be jammed on the Senate foreign aid bill. And I'm here to say that happy Valentine's Day, Mr. Johnson. I hope he stays with that. The GOP will not be jammed on the Senate bill, and you might be still attempting to put a border security bill in there. You've got H.R. 2, which is a terrific bill. So are we right about this? You're not going to be jammed on the Senate bill, and you're going to try to pivot and get back to border security? Is that possible?
That's possible, but I want to make sure everyone knows we've already passed H.R. 2. I mean, we can pass it again, but the Senate's the one that sat on that bill for months and months and months. That was one of the first pieces of legislation that we passed when we became the majority party, and it would fix the border. It's everything the president needs and more to do his job to secure the southern border, but yet the Republicans in the Senate haven't demanded that Schumer take that up, and that's disappointing, and I think that's something that has cost a lot of American lives with more fentanyl and more human trafficking pouring across our unsecure southern border.
All right, thank you for that. So now let's go back to your oversight hearings. You've got, let's see, you've got Hunter Biden coming up. You've got James Biden coming up. You just had Bobulinski. You just had Walker. Is the case for influence peddling, in your judgment, now stronger after these most recent depositions from Bobulinski and what's his name, Walker?
Rob Walker.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, as you know, in an investigation, to be able to convict someone, you have to create a pattern of crimes. And what we've done with Bobulinski and Walker's, we've created a pattern that Joe Biden was the brand. Joe Biden was what the Bidens were selling access to. I mean, the big question we've always had is, what did the Bidens do to receive the tens of millions of dollars from our enemies around the world? Well, according to Rob Walker and Tony Bobulinski, under oath, they were selling access to Joe Biden. And Joe Biden knew. That's the other thing. Joe Biden said he never met with any of these people that sent his family money. We've proven he met with all of them. So this is an investigation of Joe Biden. I think the American people, even the Democrats in Congress and their allies in the mainstream media, they know the Bidens were influence peddling, but what they try to say is, well, Joe Biden wasn't involved. Joe Biden didn't know. What we've been able to prove is not only did Joe Biden know, Joe Biden was a central figure in the influence peddling scheme.
And Mr. Chairman, sections of the Hur report, the special counsel's report on Biden's classified documents problem, are showing that some of the documents that he illegally and willfully took away from the Senate and the vice presidency had to do with Ukraine and China, which does all of a sudden cross rough to what Hunter Biden and the rest of the family influence peddlers were doing. And I'm trying to figure out, is that true? Is the classified documents going back because of what Biden was worried about? He wanted to keep stuff. He didn't want people to know. And, of course, that would add to the illegality of it. He wasn't allowed to take it out in the first place. But that just adds to the problem. What do you think about that? Is it in there?
Well, we know that some of the documents that were classified that Joe Biden mishandled were documents from Ukraine and China. This is a concern to us because we know the Bidens have received millions and millions of dollars from Ukraine and Russia. Now, one of the documents that we're concerned about that showed up on Hunter Biden's email was a document he sent to a Ukrainian oligarch. We want to know if this was one of the documents that were in Joe Biden's stash of documents that he mishandled. If so, that proves that Hunter Biden was an active participant in the mishandling of classified documents. He was trying to profit on the fact that he had classified documents. He was trying to prove worth to the Ukrainians, because remember, when Joe Biden was vice president, he was making $80,000 a month on the board of Burisma. The day Joe Biden left the vice presidency, they cut his salary in half because he had less value to him. And you know, it would be very possible that Hunter Biden was trying to prove his value to this Ukrainian oligarch that, look, I have access to these classified documents. Yeah. It fits in their business model. That's why we need to know exactly which documents and from which countries Joe Biden mishandled classified documents.
Sure. Hunter Biden could have been peddling classified documents. Who the hell knows? I mean, it's an unbelievable story.
It's very possible he was.
I know. I get it. Chairman Comer, thank you, sir. We appreciate it very, very much. Happy Valentine's Day,
Thank you.
as always.
Thank you.
All right.